Right. So today I wanted to talk about internal turning points. And so there are last time we were on, we talked about the three major turning points: the key event, the midpoint, and the all is lost moment. And today I wanted to talk about the turning point into self determination and the unexpected failure moment. And these happen kind of halfway through both Act 2A and halfway through Act 2B. And they really serve to help the character realize that they're in charge of their success, that they are the ones that's responsible for figuring out how to succeed, and it makes them double down on their effort. And it makes them really sort of focus in on, I have to succeed. I have to be the one that succeeds. And I think that these are very important for the story because they really turn your character into that more active character, that character who is actively trying but really committed. They really have that sense of, I have to do this. This is do or die for me, depending on your genre, how serious the stakes are. But this is what really turns them into an active character. Now, they've been an active character all along, so not to say that they get to be passive until now, but this is that next level active, that next level sort of responsibility as they're going through. I also wanted to take a minute to kind of highlight for you how the story structure folds on itself and is a perfect mirror. If we fold it right at the midpoint, right at the center of the story, we have this perfect mirror. And we can see that, from last week, the key event and the all is lost moment would mirror each other. They parallel each other very well. And here with the internal turning points, we've got that turning point into self-determination, and we've got the unexpected failure. If we fold the story structure right at the middle, those are perfect mirrors of each other too. And that makes sense because they're both doing the same thing. They're both coming in the middle of one half of the second act. And again, doing that kind of serious push of the internal thought process for how your character is going to become the character they need to be, or the hero that they need to be in order to succeed. So let's talk about what happens at each of these points. And I've got some examples too to go over. So at the turning point for self-determination, I'll make that slide a little bit bigger. Here we go. So at the turning point to self-determination, the character gains some clarity into the new world and the change that they need to make. So if we look purely on a external level of story, we look at the physical, what's going on, what we can see. The character is seeing, they're seeing something in the world that sort of jogs their realization that, depending on the genre, depending on the story, it allows them to see a little bit of a deeper picture. But really what it's doing is, instead of something like the key event where they're seeing like a total change about how the world works, or they're suddenly facing a big problem, here they've got a realization that allows them to approach this differently. So what happens here is it changes again the internal thought process of how they are approaching this whole problem. So again, they gain some clarity into the new world, and really they gain some insight into the change they need to make. And this might be, really we're seeing examples of, the whole middle act, or the whole middle act, the whole second act is about showing them the positive belief that they are going to need to adopt in order to succeed in that belief shift, right? It's showing them how the positive belief works and how the negative belief does not work. And so they might, for example, meet someone who actively embodies the theme, or the alternative where they meet someone who embodies the negative aspect, and they're able to look at this person and say, this was not what I expected. I see that they're acting differently. Perhaps I need to act differently. I, yeah, so they can also encounter an extreme version of that character's flaws, right? So that's the negative version of the theme, and they say, I see this person, I see myself in this person. I don't want to end up like this. I am going to show up differently. And again, their focus here is really on questioning something about themselves, which is we've got the layers building, right? So we've got the external, they see something. It's not a big dramatic piece of the external story, but they see something externally that causes them to start questioning something about themselves. At this point of the story, they are probably ultimately going to brush it off. It sort of goes into their thought bank, it goes into their ideas, but they don't really know how to take action. They're certainly not ready to make that big shift because we're still in the first half of the story. But it does build the uncertainty, it does build the questions, and so it becomes so important for that aspect, for that basically opening the door for them to have a change at some point in the future. So that's the turning point for self-determination. And some examples might be in the Hunger Games, Katniss Everdeen. If you think about what's happened in the story, in any story, they've had the inciting incident, they've taken on the adventure. In the buildup, they make a plan. They make a plan for how they're going to succeed. The key event, they step into the new world and they go, whoa, this isn't quite, this world is has got some additional challenges, and they kind of double down on the same plan. But at the key event, this is the moment where they realize, I might need to modify my plan. A little bit of internal questioning, a little bit of maybe I didn't have quite the right plan. Again, they're not ready to jump to a brand new plan, but they might make a baby step. So in the Hunger Games, again, this is the moment when Katniss Everdeen, she rides the elevator, she goes up into the actual arena, and we have the start gun or flare go off, and she has this plan. She's gonna run in and grab a bunch of stuff from the cornucopia at the center, and in a moment, she recognizes, she has a little encounter, and she's fine, and it doesn't really impact the main story that much, right? But if you remember, she has an encounter, she runs into someone else, and they're both so scared, they forget to, like, kill each other, and she runs away, but that's the moment where she modifies her plan, and she says, I need to focus on survival. I'm not going to play this game by trying to rush into the center cornucopia and get stuff. So she has this shift in, this little kind of baby shift, self-questioning, little shift in the plan. Um, One of the classic examples that I'll bring up, and we don't talk about this book very much, book movie, but in The Fault in Our Stars, if you remember, they have this the girl whose name I can't even remember. I'm so sorry, but she has this favorite author. She wants to go meet this author, and they do they go and meet this author hero. And this is classic. They meet someone who is who is not what they expected, and who highlights for them kind of pros and cons of how they've been acting. And so she meets her author hero, and he turns out to not be, she's kind of like idolized this guy. She wants to um she just, she's been looking forward to this for a really long time, and they meet this hero, and he's a complete disappointment, and it sort of readjusts some of her thinking. It readjusts her plan. It's no longer that, meeting this author and like engaging with him is the be all end all. She starts looking for more. right? So another example there, very classic, where she meets someone, I guess in the Hunger Games, she meets someone too, but it's a very quick, like, crash and run. And in The Lord of the Rings, typically I would consider the turning point to self-determination when they capture Gollum, right? So Frodo and Sam, they've had this plan, and really, I mean, the plan in The Lord of the Rings is a trilogy, so the plan gets to modify a whole bunch, but um, Frodo and Sam have had this plan. They're gonna go walk into Mordor, and at the turning point, or and I should say, I think Frodo's had this plan. He's just going to carry the ring, no big deal. He's going to carry the ring into Mordor, and that's it. And he and Sam, they've separated from the Fellowship. They're wandering the hills. They're wandering the hills, and they capture Gollum, who's been following them, and they meet Gollum. And it's a moment to me where Frodo really starts to look at himself look at himself as a ring bearer, because he's being shown this foil. He's being shown this opposite to himself, which is Gollum, who was a ring bearer for a long time, was a creature much like a hobbit, and has been corrupted by the ring. And Frodo has already seen the effects of the ring, but now he's starting to question his ability to, he's really starting to question that plan of no big deal, I'll just walk the ring into Mordor. And I believe that that's what allows Frodo to have so much compassion for Gollum, where Sam can be um a little bit more sort of hard-minded about, we should just get rid of him, he's no good. And Frodo says, we have to see the good in him, um because he's got that foil, and because he's had this turning point where he starts to question himself a little bit, and recognize that he has the potential to turn into something very much like Gollum. So there's a couple examples of turning points. So again, that's usually halfway through the first half of the second act. So very confusing, but halfway through act 2, right between the key event where they enter the new world and the midpoint where they're having some other sort of big realization about the world, we've got this central turning point. Again, it may not seem like a big deal in the overall story, but it's so important for that main character's growth and development. Right. And then the opposite to this, the mirror of this in the second half of the book, is the unexpected failure. So, they go through the midpoint, they have this spark of hope where they realize something, they start taking action. They're taking a lot of action, and then they run into the unexpected failure, which is unexpected. It's a surprising loss, and very typically it does revolve around death, as we'll see in the examples, or sort of failure of the goal on a big level. And it's really a reminder for them of the consequences if they don't succeed. And again, those consequences are often very dire, up to and including death. And so we think about, they've been going through this action phase, they've been taking steps towards reaching their goal, they've had successes, they've had those small victories, but they hit this unexpected failure, and it's a moment where the hero starts to internally question again, right? This is the moment they start to question if they're capable or not. And at this point in the adventure, they're in it, right? They know they have to continue regardless of how difficult it seems, and it's going to flip them into the second half of Act 2B, which is that renewed push, which is where they start to hit kind of reckless action, essentially because they're on this course of action towards a certain goal, but now they're questioning whether they're capable, but they know they have to succeed, and it puts them into this really, I think, psychologically intense phase where they are just they're just acting. It's often considered to be reckless action. They're maybe not making sense. They're usually not making sense even to themselves. And that all happens. We get them into that state of really not knowing what they're doing, not being certain of anything anymore. We get them into that state through the unexpected failure moment. And I will say too, we need them in that confused, uncertain state in order for them to hit the all is lost, to hit the all of the uncertainty that comes with that, and to hit that refusal moment where they stop everything. They forget about the old plan, they forget about the old goal, which wasn't going to work for them anyhow, and they take on the new plan, the new goal, and that's what allows them to ultimately succeed. So unexpected failure, where they start to question their own capability, is intensely important to allow them to have this whole belief and behavior shift in order to go into the climax and succeed at the end of the book, right? Right. So again, in this unexpected failure moment, they're not able to turn around. They're not able to go back. They're so far into this adventure. They have to keep going. But again, there's a serious loss of confidence. There's also a lot of other emotional reactions because it often revolves around death. We've got fear, we've got grief, we've got any number of things coming in and just totally confusing them. And from a purely sort of writing marketing perspective, this is the moment when your reader's invested all along, but this like totally captures your reader. By this point, the reader should not be able to put your book down because of all of the intense emotional turmoil that's happening. So some examples from some popular stories. If we look at the Hunger Games again, very classic unexpected failure. This is where Rue, the little girl that she's been partnering with inside of the arena, Rue dies. And again, it's very classic. They've been taking action, they've had a lot of successes. Katniss is just coming back from blowing up the food storage supply of the strong sort of career tributes that are in the arena, and she feels pretty good about this. But she gets back and she finds Rue is dead. And it's this moment where it's like a high and a crash. So we get that instant emotional turmoil, but it also serves to remind, again, very classically, it serves to remind Katniss of where she is and what the consequences of failure are, right? So Rue's death, Katniss looks at Rue and says, that could have been me, right? That could have been my fate. I could have died at any point in the last 20 minutes, in the last like 6 days or whatever it's been. And so it's a very kind of sobering moment. And now it gets piggybacked with this sort of announcement that maybe she could save Peeta as well, where she, those two things, and we need to have the death of Rue in order for her to look at the consequences, in order for her to feel so motivated that when we get the announcement that she could also potentially save Peeta, she just hits this reckless action phase, right? She starts to really like double down and go all in, but she's also recognizing for herself that she is being reckless. Her actions don't make a lot of sense. She's putting herself in danger in certain ways because she's traveling and she's not really sure of where the others are. So she's got all of these things going on, and it makes for an extremely compelling, I remember reading it the first time and just like my heart is pounding. And that all happens because of the unexpected failure moment, because of that moment where we are reminded of the consequences. We're essentially getting a jolt back into how nasty and how serious this situation could be. Another example, Galaxy Quest, right? So that comedy sci-fi movie from the 90s or the early 2000s, where a bunch of actors end up in space. Essentially, the aliens have mistaken their TV show for reality, and these are the heroes of the galaxy, and they they don't kidnap them, they take them, but the actors don't really understand that it's not a set, or it's not just some weird sort of appearance that they're doing. They're taken onto the ship and thrown into this real serious situation that the aliens, the Thermians, have requested their help with because the situation is so dire. And in the all is lost moment, they're going through this battle, but they're kind of having success. They've started to take on their roles as, filling in for for what they were on the TV show. So they're starting to have some success, and then one of the Thermians dies. There's an attack on the ship. They look like they're gonna outfight or overcome this infiltration, and then one of the Thermians dies. One of the Thermians gets shot and dies. And so we've got, classically, again, we've got death coming up at this point. And this is a moment where the actors, the main characters of the story, are reminded of the consequences of failure, right? It could have been any one of them that was shot and died, but it was luckily not the main character. It's never the main character that dies at this point in the book. And it is sobering for them, and it is also a reminder of why they need to really dig deep and succeed. It also gives that emotional turmoil of the extreme fear, of the unexpected attachment to this Thermian who dies. If you remember, Alan Rickman has this very intense scene, and it's this very watching it is strange, because it's this very sad death scene. He's performing this fictional death ritual from the character he plays on TV, and it's extremely touching, and it's extremely funny at the same time, which is the beauty of comedy pieces. But it's a moment where he has a big shift too, of recognizing his emotional attachment to this particular character that dies. And again, it creates all of this emotional turmoil for them going forward, because death is possible. We care about these people, we don't know what we're doing. All of this jumble that makes the rest of the book really start to ramp up, really start to stand out. And a final example, in Lord of the Rings, this is a moment where, I really felt that the unexpected failure when I was breaking it down. This is where, if you remember, Faramir captures Gollum at some point. And I'm sure it happens in the movies as well, where Faramir captures Gollum, and he's threatening Gollum with death. And Frodo has to stand up for him and get Faramir to release him. And so we're still associating with death. I want to be clear, in some genres, we're probably not going to go straight to death, but we're certainly going to go pretty dark. But in Lord of the Rings, this is where, again, so Faramir captures Gollum. He's planning to kill him, this despicable little creature, and Frodo has to stand up. This is actually a perfect mirror from the turning point to self-determination earlier, where Frodo is again standing up for Gollum, again saying, we need to give him, essentially, we need to give him grace, because Frodo sees that this could be him, right? This could be Frodo at some point turning into a Gollum-like creature, and having to, and being captured, put to death, attacked for being this kind of for being this mostly despicable creature, right? And so Frodo has to face that, and I can only imagine how that impacts Frodo going forward, that he's trying to take care of Gollum, trying to keep him safe, trying to really hope that there's redemption possible for Gollum because he sees himself, and it sort of doubles down his trust of Gollum. It doubles down how much he wants to see the good in Gollum, and it doubles down his desire to get rid of, to destroy this ring, to set out on the actual or to finish the actual quest that they've set out on. I was just thinking about like a romance example, because often the unexpected failure does not deal with someone dying, although it could in some of the like darker sort of romance subgenres. But if we think about one of my favorites, of course, in romance is the proposal, and if we think about the unexpected failure moment there, it's it's where it's where Margaret, the female lead, is out. She's doing this really embarrassing sort of chant with uh with the male lead's grandmother. She's out in the woods, and she's singing balls out in the middle of the woods, and like dancing and looking pretty crazy, and Andrew comes out and finds her, and is this moment where I think we're seeing for her, we're seeing that she's having this failure in that she's not able to continue um her facade, and and then at the same time we've got Andrew coming in and uh like sort of teasing her about it, but not making a big deal of it, not thinking it's weird, not thinking it's bad, and sort of like joking and saying it's okay that you're this weird person. And so we have this moment where her original plan to use Andrew, to use him for this fake relationship, is kind of falling apart because there's this real relationship that's developing. And it allows her to start questioning, do do I mean, it really allows her to start questioning whether she wants to mm, let me think. I think it allows her to start questioning, like, if she wants to start if she really wants to continue with this sort of fake arrangement, or if she it allows her to open up to the possibility that she might value Andrew as a friend and as a person. So another example there of a turning point that is not solely based around death. so those are the internal turning points, and again, so important for the overall story, so important to at both of those, so important to allow the main character to start questioning themselves, start questioning the plan, start having these internal shifts that allow for a big dramatic belief shift and climax at the end.